Today's topic is going to be a fun one. This is one of those things that always gets brought up if you ever start talking about video game collecting, and then if you ever mention you buy sealed video games or you collect sealed video games, people don't understand it, right? It makes no sense. Why would you collect sealed video games? You can't even play sealed video games. You must be an investor, speculator. You only care about value. Sealed video games, right? Why would you bother collecting those? Why do I choose to collect them almost exclusively now? I still have a bunch of cartridges. I still have a bunch of CIB, but I'm not actively adding to those collections anymore. So we'll start with the most obvious complaint about sealed game collecting, and then I'll tell you guys why I actually do it. So the biggest issue with buying sealed video games, you can't play them. You can't even play the games you purchase. For so many people, game collecting means buying games you want to play, and then you have a whole collection of all these games that you want to play. And a lot of people take a lot of pride in how often they play their games, or they play every single game they buy. I don't buy a new game until I play all of my old ones. A lot of people really build their collecting around that notion. And frankly, that's awesome. If that's how you enjoy video game collecting, if you enjoy playing physical games, buying retro games to play them, that is fantastic. When I buy sealed video games, I don't play them. And that's not unique now to buying sealed video games. I have a ton of complete in-box video games I barely ever play. I have a ton of cartridge video games I barely ever play. I actually still have my cartridge-only Sega Genesis collection here. When we got great games like Phantasy Star 3 in here, we even have Grindstormer, if you guys are familiar with this game. Very rare shmup on Sega Genesis, and the thing is, I'm pretty sure I played this once when I first acquired it to test it out, and it was pretty fun, but that was it. I haven't played this game or basically the majority of games in here for over 7, 8, maybe even 10 years for some of these games. We also got the Adventures of Batman and Robin in here. This is another good one. I don't purchase games because I want to play them. I don't base my collection around stuff that I want to play. My gaming and my collecting are almost two entirely different hobbies. Even when I own the physical games there, like I showed you guys some Sega Genesis games there, if I was going to go and play a Sega Genesis game, I would set up an emulator. I'm not going to go dig out my Sega Genesis, hook it up, and put in a cartridge and sit down and do the real thing. That's never been super important to me. If I'm going to play Sega Genesis, I'll hook up an emulator, or I'll basically look for the most convenient way to play the game now in 2024. There are still some times I will play physical, but even right now, I'm doing a playthrough of Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2 on PS2. I'm playing it with my younger brother, and we own a PS2. We own Baldur's Gate 2. We could play it on a physical PS2 if we wanted. We're emulating it, and it's fantastic. So for myself, buying sealed video games doesn't change anything. I will still play the exact same amount of old video games, retro games, as I would if I was buying open video games. And I kind of see it the same way as people who do buy CIB, or even if you're buying like PS2 games, right? But you want it to come with the original case. We all know you're not playing an original box. You don't need an original case in order to play the game. So even people who are just buying complete in-box video games, there's more there than just buying it to play it. There is that collector notion already taking place, just not to the same degree, I guess you could say. So it's not about playing the games. Then why do you want to own these sealed video games? Why do people choose to purchase sealed? What's the purpose, right? What's the point? At the core of it, the point is just game collecting. The exact same way people buy open games, people buy sealed games. They buy them because they like them. They buy them because they have a fondness to the game, to the characters, whatever it is, right? They like to do it. But sealed specifically, and why I personally like it so much, is that sealed video game collecting evens the playing field. And I don't mean for myself and other buyers, I mean amongst the games themselves. All of a sudden, rarity or prices and demand, everything becomes a lot more equal, or the distribution of demand, rarity, and supply becomes completely different when you do sealed collecting. When we talk about open, CIB, loose collecting, a lot of the most expensive games or the most sought after collector titles aren't really the greatest games on the consoles. It feels like the collector communities kind of find whatever obscure game exists on the console that's not bad, you know, it's not great, but the whole collector community just decides like, oh, that game is the grail, like everyone needs to love Kuon for PS2, and that's going to be the most expensive video game. And very, very few people are going to have a nostalgic connection to a game like Kuon, or on the GameCube, one of the most expensive games, NCAA 2K3 basketball. These aren't games that people have nostalgia for. These games are being collected for a lot of the purpose of just collecting, which is fine. That's great. I don't care. If you want to go buy Kuon to let it sit on your shelf, if you want to go pay the $500 or whatever it costs now to slap it inside your PS2, fantastic. If I'm making the decision to buy a video game because I want to play it, and the game is going to cost me $500, or I could emulate it, I'm going to emulate it every single time. Different strokes for different folks. I don't really care what you do with your video games. But when you talk about factory sealed specifically, suddenly something like a Black Label Super Mario Sunshine, one of the greatest GameCube games, I know some people dunk on it, I freaking love Sunshine, but all of a sudden getting a factory sealed copy of that game is like as difficult, as expensive, as challenging as trying to get something like Cubivore. And if Cubivore is your favorite game on the GameCube, that is fantastic. That's awesome. But I personally don't have any connection to the game. And I do own a copy of Cubivore. I chased after a copy because it was one of the GameCube grails, right? I own a complete in-box copy of Cubivore. I genuinely don't think I've ever played it. I've heard it's kind of a neat game. I've seen some gameplay. I'm pretty positive I have never put my copy into a GameCube. A lot of people will even place restrictions on themselves to try and prolong the hobby. People will say they only buy at local video game stores, they don't use online whatsoever, I only buy from flea markets. Certain restrictions like that are people trying to prolong or add longevity to the hobby. Because frankly, at any time, a lot of us could just pop onto eBay and buy whatever we wanted. And of course, with sealed video games, your average game is very, very expensive. So I literally can't just go buy everything I want. I can't afford it, right? So automatically, by going after sealed video games, I place a massive financial barrier in front of myself. I know that I will never be able to buy every single game I want. And I like that. That's awesome. I like having to make choices. I like having to hunt. I like having to do all of this stuff. So when we talk about buying sealed versus CIB versus cartridge only, if we go back to NES or Super Nintendo stuff, factory sealed games are very, very expensive. There's still a lot of complete in-box video games that I am going to purchase and that I basically have to, like, I literally can't buy the sealed versions of some games. And that's okay. That's completely fine. And I'm going to try and get the best possible version that I can reasonably afford. Because all of this revolves around the collecting and the appreciation and the chase, the hunt. I want to try and get the best possible representation of the games that I really like. So if the best I can do is get a complete in-box first print Legend of Zelda on NES, then that's what I'm going to try and get. But if we go to something like Xbox 360, PS3, I mean, a lot of the best games on the console are literally $5 to $20 complete in box. Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty games, Gears of War, all of those major franchises are super cheap to buy complete in box. But if you swap to trying to buy first print Gears of War, first print Modern Warfare, first print Last of Us, factory sealed copies of those games, suddenly the hobby gets like 10 times harder. And I would personally rather spend $200, $300 buying a copy of The Last of Us, a game that I truly loved, right? Like, that was a fantastic game. I have a great connection to it. There's a lot of emotional attachment and nostalgia to The Last of Us. I would far rather spend $300 on a factory sealed copy of that game rather than buying some random PS3 game like Africa that I guess everyone has decided is rare and collectible now. And a lot of people get hung up that factory sealed makes no sense. You're paying for a small piece of plastic film. Like, who cares? Why does it? You know what I mean? You'll hear a lot of that kind of argument. And I think those people even know why it matters. I think those people can understand it, but you're not paying for the plastic film itself. You're paying for what that plastic film represents. It's like when you see a first edition Pokemon card. No one's getting all excited just because the card has a little bit more black ink on it. People get excited because of what that first edition stamp represents. The first editions of Pokemon cards in North America, the first distribution of them. When a video game is still factory sealed, especially a game from the 80s, the 90s, that represents a game that never was utilized for the literal purpose it was created for. Like everyone loves to say, right? Video games are made to be played. Factory sealed video games should not exist. And that's what makes it so compelling. That's what makes it so interesting. You're going after a collectible that literally shouldn't exist. And in a lot of ways, that represents the ultimate version that you can buy for your collection. Some people buy the ultra limited collector's edition and it comes with statues, and they buy the ultimate version of the game they really enjoy. Buying factory sealed copies in a lot of ways is the same kind of idea of that. Hopefully that helps explain a little bit as to why people like myself go after sealed video games. Make sure to let me know how much you disagree with me down in the comment section. Say thank you to every single patron who helps support the channel, as well as the YouTube members. I can't do this without you guys. Hit the like button before you go, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.